Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, January the 20th, 2014. And in our top story today, we find that the Department of Homeland Security is giving the Muslim Brotherhood VIP treatment. This is an exclusive story by Paul Joseph Watson. A newly released document obtained via Freedom of Information request says that members of a Muslim Brotherhood delegation traveling through Minneapolis Airport, New York's JFK Airport, and Dulles Airport were handed expedited entry known as, quote, port courtesy, unquote, which is normally reserved for high-ranking government officials and dignitaries. And of course, at the time, they didn't have anybody that was even elected in Egypt, so they can't make the claim that that was the case, that they were being given treatment because they were associated with a government. But we've seen this happening over and over again. And we know from internally released TSA documents that came out during a lawsuit that as far back as 2011, they admitted internally that there were no threats at the airports or against airplanes. And yet they subject all of us to this kind of treatment as if we were terrorists. But when we have the Muslim Brotherhood coming in, they get the VIP treatment. Just amazing. But look at what else is happening with CIA terror-sponsored groups. Kurt Nemo's article on INFOWARS.com says CIA-connected terror group issues threat ahead of Russian Olympic Games. Now, these people put a video up on YouTube that has now since been taken down, but they said the men warned that terrorists will attack the Winter Olympics scheduled to begin on February the 6th. And the quote said, "We have prepared a present for you, President Putin, and all those tourists who will come over." Now, as Kurt Nemo points out, this group that put the video up was actually created during the Second Chechen War. They're loyal to a Chechen commander who was indoctrinated and trained by the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence in Coast Afghanistan at a camp that was set up in the early 1980s by the CIA and ISI and run by an Afghan warlord who was funded by the CIA and the Afghan drug trade. Now, remember back to the Boston bombing, we found out that Uncle Ruslan had connections to Graham Fuller, who was the CIA head in that area and was involved with Chechen rebels. This is what Graham Fuller said about the role of Chechen rebels and Islam terrorists. He said, "The policy of guiding the evolution of Islam and of helping them against our adversaries worked marvelously well in Afghanistan against the Russians. The same doctrines can still be used to destabilize what remains of Russian power, especially to counter the Chinese influence in Central Asia." Now, we also know that Prince Bandar had threatened Putin. It was reported by a Muslim paper over his opposition to the Syrian war. They threatened him with violence at the Olympic Games. So these connections with the CIA and Chechen terrorists, as well as the threats of Prince Bandar, are very concerning. It could be something that, if there is an attack there at the Olympic Games, that could be something to further martial law in the United States. Now, we also see that both China and Iran are preparing new weapons. Now, Paul Joseph Watson is reporting that China is preparing to target U.S. aircraft carriers with a new hypersonic missile that they just tested. He says China's new hypersonic missile vehicle is primarily designed to target U.S. aircraft carriers. Military expert Chen Hu told the state-run Chinese Central Television, in yet another admission of Beijing's increasingly hostile geopolitical posturing. Now, this is the Wu-14, a hypersonic glide vehicle, which can penetrate missile defense systems by traveling at up to 10 times the speed of sound. Well, remember back in the 1990s when all the military technology was transferred to the Chinese, both covertly and overtly by the Clinton administration? Now that they have enhanced capabilities, they're using this now to push for a new arms race here with the military-industrial complex. And we see that another former deputy director of the IAEA is speculating that Iran could be just 2 to 3 weeks away from a nuclear bomb if they don't abide by the new agreement. He says they still have quite a substantial stock of uranium hexafluoride, which is enriched to 20%. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that it's hexafluoride, because one of the reasons we have fluoridation of the water, if you'll remember, is because we're disposing of byproducts of both the aluminum and the nuclear industry. Hexafluoride is something that is used to turn the uranium into a gas so that it can be used in the enrichment process, and the waste product of that is, of course, dumped in our water. Now, we also see global crisis in the financial markets. We have a mega default in China that is looming for January the 31st. Chinese state media reported that China Credit Trust Company warned investors that they may not be repaid when one of its wealth management products matures on January the 31st. And what they did was the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China sold the China Credit Trust product to its customers in the Shaanxi province. Sounds just like America, doesn't it? They dump this stuff before they get stuck with it, and then they disavow any connection to it. Now, this is about $500 million that's going on in China that they're going to stick investors there with. In Germany, we see that Deutsche Bank there is warning that they're having challenges ahead. They're looking at 1.3 billion net loss just last quarter that they're reporting. And New York Times reports that Deutsche Bank, which is the largest investment banking operation in Europe, disclosed a bigger than expected quarterly loss and warned of a difficult year ahead. So we see that the global financial crisis is not anywhere under control. It's moving across. It's in Germany, it's in China. And there's an interesting story that was in Zero Hedge that says Germany has recovered a paltry 5 tons of gold from the New York Fed after a year. They say a year after the Bundesbank announced its stunning decision, driven by Zero Hedge's revelations, to repatriate 674 tons of gold from the New York Fed and the French Central Bank. It had only managed to transfer a paltry 37 tons. And he points out that at that rate, they're not going to be on schedule to get it over the 8 years that they said that they would be able to collect it. And that only the New York Fed had only produced a tiny 5 tons of gold. The rest of it came from the French. Now, that 5 tons of gold is really only about 2/3 of 1% of the amount in question. Now, the excuse that we hear is that the transportation from Paris is simpler and they can start it more quickly. And Zero Hedge asks, how exactly is a gold transport simpler because it originates in Paris and not in New York? Or does the New York Fed gold travel by car along the bottom of the Atlantic and is French gold transported by a Vespa scooter out of the country? And the question is this just more central bank shenanigans about gold? Now, here at home in Austin, Texas, we had a very interesting event this weekend. We had the Texas Department of Public Safety hold back gun protesters, people who were protesting about open carry violations. They held them back as they let historical reenactors enter the state capitol grounds using the same weapons, weapons which are not firearms according to Texas law. So now we see the DPS here in Texas acting just like Obama, saying that they're going to write the laws. Here's what happened in a story that's exclusive from Kit Daniels here at INFOWARS.com. It says the Department of Public Safety in Texas banned a gun rights group from carrying black powder firearms outside the Capitol today, despite allowing historical reenactors to fire their rifles on Capitol grounds this afternoon. And he has a quote from one of the organizations here. They said, the problem is that we've been trying for 3 months to get black powder firearms here just for this rally for open carry. We open carried at this rally last year, yet they told us that we couldn't carry this year. We had Come and Take It Austin, another gun rights group, presenting a black powder pistol as a raffle prize for this event. And they've been speaking with them on a daily basis and were told that they could not bring it into the Capitol grounds because it was an explosive device. So the Department of Public Safety is taking Judge Dredd one step further. They're not just judge, jury, and executioner. Now they claim to be able to write the laws as well. Well, that's it for the news portion of our program, but stay tuned, and I'm going to be talking to Bill Ayers about his re-education camps and the Weatherman bombings. Stay tuned.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. And the InfoWars Army is standing strong. Wake up your family, friends, and neighbors and break the matrix at InfoWarsStore.com. Learn the truth and spread the message of liberty with the world's most comprehensive collection of books and documentary films. Maintain a healthy metabolism and energize your body to perform at peak health with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine. Protect your family and be prepared with survival foods and emergency preparedness kits. And now you can drink safe water with your own ProPure water filtration system, which removes fluoride and other harmful chemicals from your family's water supply. Save 10% with the promo code WATER. So join the revolution. InfoWarsStore.com.
Introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.
Welcome back. Now, on Thursday, I questioned Bill Ayers on his involvement in the educational establishment, where I believe for the last several decades he's been manufacturing consent for a Marxist agenda. But on Friday, I went back to another speaking engagement, and I asked him about the Weather Underground's involvement in bombings, as well as in plotting re-education camps, where they would have the mass murder of people who oppose their Marxist utopia. Notice how he tries to shift the discussion to roads, and notice how he engages in ad hominem attacks on those who reported this.
The accusation that to establish your society, that you would put people in re-education camp.
Yeah, say it again.
That to establish your society, you put people in a re-education camp.
That's Larry Grathwell.
Yeah, Larry Grathwell, right.
No, nothing like it was ever said.
Nothing was ever said.
But I was thinking about our conversation this morning because, you know, I realized that I didn't fully understand, I still don't fully understand where you're coming from, but you know, the idea, I'm sure you're for certain kinds of things about government, right?
I want to be left alone. I don't want to use government to solve anything.
So you don't want roads. So I'm not a big fan of government, and I don't know why you guys would paint me that way.
Categorically denied.
Categorically, never said anything of the sort. And Larry Grathwell, except in some fever swamp once you go through the rabbit hole, he has some credibility. What credibility does he have? He calls himself an FBI agent. He wasn't an FBI agent.
No, but he
has no credibility at all. He was a paid snitch, and
but because
he
of the violence, because the violence that was happening at the time, because
what violence?
Bombings, that sort of thing. Because
you mean the bombings of Vietnam? You mean 6,000 people?
No, I mean your
killed?
bombings.
Oh wait, whoa!
Yeah. Because of yours, it has a certain credibility because you're bombing.
It has no credibility. Yeah. Nobody who knew.
And also, whenever communists and Marxists take over, we have necklacing, we have mass murder, we have
re-education. Whenever capitalists take over, we have torture, we have re-education camps, we have bombing, we have the murder of people. The Vietnam War was a war of terror where 6,000
American Revolution, they didn't do anything like that to anybody. Those guys are capitalists.
I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
6,000 people a week.
Oh, I'm not. I would never.
So when you talk about the violence of those days, I hope you're talking about that. About John McCain, the terrorist.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Okay,
I agree.
Thank you.
But
that's all I wanted to know.
I think it was counterproductive to do violence here because I think it galvanized the middle class. I think these guys are right.
I don't see what the evidence of that is. That's an interesting theory. Where's your evidence of that?
Well, a lot of the middle class would say if we got people who are avowed Marxists that are bombing.
Where's your evidence? So you're saying there were these people who were against the war, and then somebody put a bomb in the Capitol, and they said, God damn it, I'm for the war. I'd like to see the evidence of that.
Yeah, because it was based on fear of communism. No, I just think that violence. I think violence like that is counterproductive. In the same way, in the same way that Timothy McVeigh, when he blew up the North Building, what that did was that put out
kill and murder people. That's an entirely.
Well, I don't even believe that. I believe it was a false flag attack. So I don't even.
What?
I believe it was a false flag attack. So yeah.
destroying property, for the Berrigan brothers to burn draft files. Did that really make people pro-war? I don't think so.
No. But bombing parks and killing police, that does.